It is 3:30 in the morning on the last day of our story mammal series with Molly. It's very, very aware of the silliness that it is that I have this pattern of sabotaging the magic space of sleep when I'm most excited about prepping myself in a way that has me really resourced and integrated, and I'm still in this space. And I struggle with whether or not, or I oscillate between thinking that it's good and necessary, and that this is where I'm meant to find myself. I'm trusting my process. I trust my process. And then also the nagging feeling that I'm doing the thing of forcing myself to stare and to grind through under the impression that is where my work lies. But I've been so grateful to myself this whole time and soft with myself, letting myself miss a couple of the Q&As while I was with my grandmother, and just accepting that I wasn't as active in the forum and all the things, and just not stressing about it, just letting myself be where I was, and understanding and trusting that that slowness and that softness. And even though so many people have shared so many beautiful occurrences of them really being present with the pendulation and actively practicing, and I'm just I think I've been naming my sensations more. Now I know I've been naming my sensations more. I celebrate it. I have shared it with my partner in real time that I'm really grateful to be speaking to these sensations instead of submitting to a narrative. And I've just been moving really slowly and trusting that the knowing is all there. That the real effort of slowing is to be more attentive to all of the avenues that lead us back to ourselves that we pass when we move quickly. And I'm grateful for where I am. Anyway, I wanted to share a couple of these writings from last week's session. One, because I want to be more active, and I want people to know that I care about this group so much, and I've been so moved by several of you, and the container as a whole. Really, every little moment of people being vulnerable is I just see you as my loved ones, as me, as parts of me and parts of my family and community growing up and community now, and all the ways that I can see the people who I've associated trauma with being healed and held. And it's so stinking beautiful. My grandmother was diagnosed a few weeks ago with acute leukemia, and her health is rapidly declining. And I went and stayed with her for a week, and I missed the third and fourth Q&As. And I just listened to them over the last day. And it feels like perfect, all of it, the order of everything. It feels perfect. But this space with my grandmother feels like burying my mother all over again. But different. And it's fascinating to me all the ways that stories shift so slowly, and it's perfectly fine and as good that my grandmother's story shifts marginally, seemingly from my scope, not even into another story. It's just the same story. And her soft, just largely pixelated, or like these huge honey crystals that are just slowly sludged through, but she's not trying to move any faster, and so it's neither here nor there how viscous the soil is. Anyway, I'm learning a lot, and my whole story, the quiet story that I decided to lean into with Molly's encouragement, to lean into what I don't know, what I'm not familiar with, what is wanting to be voiced, what is wanting to be heard. It was about belonging. It's about home and belonging. And in my mind, all of you are along with me, knowing that this is my story. And then in my mind, none of you know. And in my knowing, all of our stories are the same story, just different iterations, different interpretations, different labels. Oh my goodness. And with that said, the first prompt of last week's session was, why do you feel you are living this particular story of who you are? What meaning have you made on why? And I have never, I raised my hand. Molly, you have so many people in this one. And, but I was so stoked. I really wanted to share this one because it was the first time I've ever completed a prompt. Like, completed it. I wasn't like regrettably or like squeezing out the last word super scribbly, like not legible to anyone else other than myself, or like just not even getting to where I wanted to, or like writing past when you say last word, or just like all of the anxiety and tension and like story that comes with the like pressure and timing. It wasn't there. I wrote this. I was born to write you, born of the blood and nimble, soft, strong hands that poured you onto pages in the generations before me. I belong to you. I am of you. It is my dharma, my duty, my becoming to read, to listen, to witness, and to pick up this pen. And then I set my pen down and I sat for like 3 minutes just complete. That was beautiful. That was beautiful. Okay, and the 5 different ways to tell the story. I don't know how to count. I am rootless, dejected from the soil by death and choice not my own. I am a child of assimilation and blending, a testimony to dreams sought after, and systems, and the success of systems of isolation. I carry the burden of coming home after generations before me moved their legs to leave. I carry the torch of coming home after generations before me made great strides with their powerful legs to free. I am abandoned. My mother's leaving, all of my mother's leaving, in slow draws of disorientation and fluid retention. I am alive, the continuation of blood, their memory, alive in me. This blood is the water, these veins, the roots. And then the, what is it, Mad Lib? The Mad Lib poetry. That I read that several of you wanted or asked if I would add to the forum. Thank you. What lives inside me is alive and pulsing, oscillating between hibernation and prison break fever. The one that wants attention during the season of my life is, great surprise, my blood, home, belonging. It moves stealthy, cheetah crouch crawl to sprint pounce, and sometimes morphs into a puddle, shallow splash or thick sand, quick stuck. When it gets too big, too much, too fast, it can feel like a riptide, disorienting, relocating, drowning within. My impulse has often been to move, to spread my wings for freedom. That's really just distance and leaves me feeling lost, wandering, uncertain of if there's something I'm even moving toward. I find my width, the container of me, with my eyes closed, my breath in through nostrils, held, middle finger tapping surely, no long red acrylic to detract from the thudding of knock on my heart, to come home, to answer the door. My body wants to inhabit home. And then I want to read this. This was just written. I finally got around to watching the third and fourth Q&A. Our last session of Molly's Story Mammal Workshop series is in 8 hours, and I wanted to be caught up. I feel a lot when I'm tired and immersing myself in stirring community. I didn't planned this, didn't I? My throat is narrowing again, clumpy, like a gunk would prevent me from speaking, and so the way back of the room, 8-year-old me is readying to holler to be heard. The vocal cords are congruous to the pelvic floor muscles, she said, and I instantly think of my mother loosing her tongue of a traumatic sexual assault from her 13th year, lowered inhibitions, scream cry therapy. Something about trauma here does not feel quite right. Trauma feels acknowledged, and Mom always had trouble with the first step. The tightness of her tongue around the loss of her firstborn, not with breath. Continuing a lineage of wombs to be stripped of their first attempt at holding their life in their hands, life they made, reaffirmed of their lack of control to make it and hold it. I missed the third and fourth Q&As to be at my grandma's bedside. In-home, hospice, Napavine bedside, sitting in silent service, waiting for insight, a window into what led to the curse of our womb lineage, the firstborn always taken, as tribute, as penance. She was silent. She opened her mouth for the occasional spoonful of vanilla milkshake, to alarm me to her cada 20 minutos need to mobilize to the bathroom, to request her feet be covered, uncovered, and again to offer up her spoonful, a tribute, a penance, to the empty ice cream bucket now mandatorily accompanying her bedside. Her clock would strike on the hour, and I swear, even if she was mid-purge, she would come to a paused gaze, eyes fixed on the wall-hanging orchestra, never blinking away from the opening of the clock face, the slow rotation and opening of the gold face plate, whilst a melody played and the inner workings of the timing mechanism were on full display. Until 30 seconds later, the clock's face, full rotation, came to an end, and the two half circles remerged. Her eyes would be tear-filled. She would blink. What is happening in those moments? Where does she go? Is it a reflection on time, transfixing on music, systems, distraction, acceptance? I recall having my wisdom teeth removed a few years back. The molars were partially impacted, my jaw crowded. One molar was sawed in two in order to be extracted. I walked home in a hazy sunset, drooling on myself. I was awake throughout the procedure, awake to the areas the local anesthesia was effective, and where it was less so. At home, I drew a bath, lit candles, and let the steam sigh me. I attuned to the pressure. I almost wrote pain there, but that too would not feel quite right, and I want to find the words to describe my process instead of subscribing to the narratives already laid out for me. Those narratives, if subscribed to, would have me identifying sensation as pain and popping Vicodin. The nurse asked, "You've not been taking your morphine?" "No," cracked my grandmother's lifelong knee-jerk response. Pain medication just covers up the problem. And I find myself wondering if that isn't the point. Then curious that I'm identifying with her that there is a problem, or that there's a point. There is no problem. You have acute leukemia. You are dying. The point was to live. If you want to feel, then say you want to feel. And so I sat in the bathtub, salt and eucalyptus soaked, and I let the sensation in my jaw absorb water. I let the sensation in my jaw absorb water, get heavy, and let my head tilt to drop in the direction it was drawn. I continued this, in retrospect pendulation, for hours, at times with my fingertips on the pivot point, now known as the temporomandibular joint, eyes tearing, mouth salivating, throat softly stretching. My world is non-binary. There is no red stone, no blue stone. She gifted me a jar of opals, October baby to October baby. The stones are always both. Identifying the stones this way was never accessible to my mind. It didn't make sense, and I now feel it clarifying. The stones were always both. It is a felt sense. For all of my words and studies, I do not and have never identified myself as a fan or subscriber to taxonomy. I understand its utility and significance, and am able to wield it, and indeed strive to do so, because that is the land where my intellectual peers reside, but I reject the notion that we reside there because it is our home. Our intellect is not the institution. Our intellect is in our home. Maybe my searching for home is a coming-to-head realization that we've been forcefully, coercively relocated out of and away from our felt bodies, a devastating displacement. But I've always known this to be foreign land. My soul does not require a binary to seesaw into center. I am not a line segment. We are not line segments. We are spectrums. Spectrums to planes, to full-ass spheres, and better yet, the ever-collapsing, folding, consuming in on itself torus, Mobius, infinite shapeless shape. Our form is a felt one, and who gives a fuck about naming parts when I can better feel the whole, when I abandon the distracting preoccupation with terms and opt instead to be scooped up, swooshed down, and swooped into the all-encompassing, infinite directional titration pendulation that is simply being. The urgent, consuming, exhaustive, excruciating need to name points to pendulate between is good and necessary to deliver me here, to a place where my words can name the process futile, because words are not essence. They're the fleeting expression of essence, the temporary fabric, all at once adorning and constricting essence. And I yearn for this coming grand exodus, returning to essence. So I abandon the words that attempt to convey to me that I'm approaching comprehension of process, and I land back in the body, back in my home that needs no articulated validation for its existing, knowing as it unravels and expands, contracts and recoils, never knowing a good or bad, because both the inhale and exhale are essential in this cycle of being home.